Immigration fallout. Die-hard Trump supporters remain steadfast amid a heated national debate over the president's policies. Showdown in Congress. A sweeping House GOP immigration overhaul teeters on the brink of collapse as lawmakers struggle to find solutions. Next steps. As the world worries about North Korea's nuclear program, a poll finds Americans approve of the president's recent summit. Papal trip. Pope Francis visits Geneva and encourages Christians to focus on unity, not differences. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 21st, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. First Lady Melania Trump makes an unannounced visit to the U.S.-Mexico border. Her goal? To see firsthand how migrant children can be reunited with their parents. In Washington, President Trump says the U.S. has the worst immigration laws in the history of the world. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The First Lady arrived in McAllen, Texas, less than 24 hours after President Trump signed an executive order to keep migrant families together after they illegally enter the country. Critics say the order doesn't go far enough for families. The president says greater immigration reform is needed.
We have come up with a lot of solutions, but we have Democrats that don't want to approve anything because that's probably, they think, bad for the election that's coming up. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people suffering, and that's unfortunate.
As the president slammed Democrats during a White House cabinet meeting, First Lady Melania Trump visited McAllen, Texas. She toured a facility where migrant children stay, some separated from parents. She's thanking border officials for their service and sharing her concern.
I also like to ask you how I can help to these children to reunite with their families as quickly as possible.
Critics are reacting to the president's executive order aimed at keeping detained families together. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network says it doesn't do enough. The immigrants' rights group says the order notably did not address the problem of thousands of children who have already been separated from their parents, many of whom have no idea where their sons and daughters are. Some parents have even been deported while their children remain in federal custody. Today, the president defended his action, saying the U.S. will care for migrants who cross illegally, but the law still needs to be followed.
We have to house them, and we should be taking good care of them, and then we should return them back home.
Today, the Justice Department formally asked a federal judge to change the rules on detaining families caught at the border. A previous ruling states families can only be detained for 20 days. It comes as the Trump administration is continuing its zero-tolerance policy where anyone caught crossing the border is criminally charged. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Less than a month after his historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, President Trump is apparently gearing up for another high-profile meeting. Diplomatic sources say the president plans to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin next month. Nothing official has been announced, but the meeting could take place in Vienna. The House plunges into its long-awaited immigration debate. Republicans are facing an uphill battle. The fight initially centered on helping young dreamer immigrants stay in the country, but it's been complicated by dramatic images and sounds of children detained at the border. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The House debated two bills today. They shot down a conservative plan which would have offered dreamers renewable 6-year visas. Now they're delaying a vote on a moderate GOP bill. It would fund the wall and provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. But if you listen to lawmakers today, it won't be an easy sell. The House finally debates an issue they've been avoiding: immigration reform.
What we are doing here today is simply insane.
Democrats oppose both GOP bills on the table today, and some point to Catholic leaders.
Pope Francis said, just tweeted, pray together, walk together, work together.
For Norma Torres, a Democrat from California, this debate is personal.
In 1970, a Guatemalan couple decided to send their daughter to the U.S. That young girl was me.
Mark Walker, a Republican from North Carolina, calls pro-abortion Democrats hypocrites.
I certainly agree from a humanitarian side. I would like to see my Democrats friends have the same outrage at the unborn that are also separated from their families. To me, it's a little bit disingenuous when we can't get a single vote on even life laws that would restrict abortion.
House Speaker Paul Ryan stopped short of predicting a bill would pass, but he says today's debate is itself progress.
Our immigration system's broken. We have a lot of problems that are broken. I do believe we're advancing really good ideas today with the votes we're having, and I think these are the seeds that are going to be planted for an ultimate solution, whether they get through today or they get through tomorrow or the day after that.
The GOP needs to win over conservatives in their party. They say the moderate bill amounts to amnesty. Now, Democrats aren't convinced either. For example, they object to scrapping the visa lottery system. That gives permanent residency to about 50,000 people a year. Lauren?
Jason, leaders in the church have been vocal in their support of a comprehensive immigration reform plan. Are they on board with this bill?
Well, the Bishops' Committee on Migration is urging lawmakers to vote against the bill. They cite cuts to family-based immigration and changes to asylum protections, among other things. But this is an issue that Catholics can disagree about. The church leaves the faithful free to make up their own mind.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. A majority of Americans now approve of President Trump's handling of U.S. relations with North Korea. A new poll taken after the president's historic summit with Kim Jong-un shows the Republican president with the highest rating on any individual issue since his inauguration. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The poll from the Associated Press NORC finds 55% of Americans back the president's diplomacy with North Korea. That's up from 42% in March. But Americans are still skeptical about whether the U.S. really can trust the communist nation's rogue leader.
I'm not saying things can't happen, things go wrong, mistakes are made, relationships get broken. But right now you are so safe.
President Trump tells his supporters there's more work ahead to ensure Kim Jong-un is serious about giving up his nuclear weapons program. A new poll shows most Americans approve of the president's diplomacy, but they don't trust Kim. The survey was conducted immediately after Trump's June 12th summit. There, North Korea agreed to work towards denuclearization in exchange for U.S. security guarantees. Defense Secretary James Mattis says there's no concrete evidence the North Koreans have done so.
Obviously, at the very front end of the process, the detailed negotiations have not begun. I wouldn't expect that at this point.
This week, Kim wrapped up a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. China, North Korea's biggest trading partner, encouraged Kim to participate in the summit. Olivia Enos traveled to Singapore during the meeting. She says despite the optimism, the U.S. shouldn't lose sight of Kim's record of human rights abuses.
An individual who has 80,000 to 120,000 people in prison camps, sometimes just for mere possession of a Bible, for watching a South Korean drama. This is an incredibly brutal man.
Enos hopes human rights and the persecution of Christians in particular will be a key issue in future negotiations. During his rally last night, President Trump said North Korea had returned some of the remains of 200 American troops missing from the Korean War, but there is no confirmation of the move from the military at this point. Some reports indicate North Korea is planning on handing over some of the service members' remains to the United Nations in South Korea, which will then eventually be transferred to Hawaii. Lauren?
We'll have an in-depth discussion about that coming up later in the program. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Iraq's Supreme Court approves a manual recount of all ballots from last month's national elections. The court's ruling today will acknowledge ballots from abroad and voters displaced by ISIS. The decision is a result of allegations of fraud. No single bloc won a majority. Negotiations are underway to form a new government. It's not clear whether the recount will change the outcome of the vote. Emergency workers say it is not looking good as authorities in Indonesia continue to search for more people. 180 are believed to have died in a ferry accident. The ship sank in Lake Toba on Monday. Only 18, including the captain, have been rescued. Pope Francis is in Geneva, Switzerland, meeting with Christian leaders from around the world.
Le distanze non siano scuse. È possibile già ora camminare secondo lo Spirito.
The Holy Father arrived this morning in Geneva, one of the world's first cities to adopt the Protestant Reformation. Francis made a pitch for unity at an ecumenical prayer service hosted by the World Council of Churches. Earlier today, I spoke to our eyes and ears on the ground. And the Pope has just entered the building. That's where Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us. She's in Geneva, Switzerland, traveling with the Pope. Juliette, what an amazing moment this is. Why is the Pope making this trip?
Lauren, it is indeed an amazing moment. And you know why he's making this trip? Because of unity. It's all about Christian unity. That's what he said to me and the other journalists on the papal flight this morning, flying in from Rome. And before he landed at the World Council of Churches, which is marking its 70th anniversary, and it's hosting the Holy Father for that anniversary. Now, this is a fellowship of 350 churches that aims to show the unity of the Christian faith. Now, the Roman Catholic Church, as we know, is not a member. The Holy Father told his host, however, that he is a pilgrim here today, seeking unity and peace.
Juliette, Christians broke away from the Catholic Church 5 centuries ago, but after Vatican II ended in 1965, the Church set out to repair the relationship. What is his message going to be to Christians today?
Now, Pope Francis is calling upon Christians to ask the Spirit to strengthen our steps, to walk in the spirit of the Apostle Paul, and he reflected on the Apostle's words to the Galatians who were experiencing conflict and division. So ecumenism is a great enterprise operating at a loss, but he added it's not only important just to walk together, but it's an act of obedience to the Lord and the world. And he urged all Christians to concentrate, Lauren, on what unites, not on what separates us. And there was something not originally on his schedule. Now the Pope met privately with North and South Korean Christians. The World Council of Churches, as we know, is active in promoting dialogue and peace between North and South Korea, and the delegations from the two Koreas are attending these meetings here of the WCC's Central Committee, which is currently underway this week in Geneva.
North Koreans aren't even allowed to have Bibles, so that is actually very remarkable that they're both there. Catholics in Switzerland make up 40% of the population. The Holy Father is going to say a mass for about 50,000 people right behind you. What will his message be to the Swiss faithful?
Well, in his homily, Lauren, he highlighted 3 words: Father, bread, and forgiveness. Now, how our Father is the formula of our life that reveals our identity. Whereas for bread, he made the bread reference, saying Jesus asks us every day to pray the Our Father, asking for our daily bread, and that's what we need to do. And it's the essence of life, he said. It's the food that keeps us all alive. And lastly, Lauren, as for forgiveness, it's difficult, he said, to forgive, especially when we're irked by someone whom we have already forgiven. But the Pope said that the Lord wants us to forgive as a gift to him, because he said forgiveness creates miracles. It turns evil into good. And just for a little color here, Lauren, now the crowd has come into this convention center, and as they made their way in, they could stop and get their pictures taken with a Swiss Guard. And as we know, the Swiss Guards have a rich history in protecting the Pope for more than 500 years.
Traveling with the Pope is something that is actually great for them to be able to do. Juliette Lindley, thank you for your reporting. Our EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent on the papal plane with the Pope, and now reporting from Geneva, Switzerland. We'll have a little bit more from you later in the show.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you.
Coming up, we discuss President Trump's executive order to stop the separation of families at the U.S.-Mexico border. Plus, next week is Religious Freedom Week. What you can do to help. In addition to Melania Trump's visit to McAllen, Texas, U.S. mayors gathered at a holding facility for immigrant children at the Texas-Mexico border. They accused President Trump of making a humanitarian crisis of his own creation. The mayors from 20 cities across the country are calling for the immediate reunification of immigrant children with their families. Joining me now is Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
President Trump signed the executive orders keeping families together, but it's unclear what happens to those 2,000 children who have been separated. About 239, I think, went to New York City. Mayor de Blasio didn't know about it. American Airlines is saying, and other airlines are saying, we don't want to take these kids. So what next? What happens next in this crisis?
Well, we know for the kids that are coming across the border now with their families, everyone will be detained together. But for those existing children that you're talking about, the agencies are working out how to get around the existing restrictions. So the governing law in all of this is something called the Flores case from 1997. And it says that children cannot be detained for more than 20 days. And that's why you saw under President Obama a number of these children, unaccompanied minors and children, with family members undergoing prosecution, were sent to live with their family members or were put into foster care. So that's exactly what's happening now. It's kind of unclear. There's going to have to be a little bit of back and forth with the agencies to figure out, how to reunify families and if that's going to happen.
And I'm sure the administration is waiting for that to happen, to change the narrative that's happening right now. Let's take a look at a picture that Time magazine put on its cover. It is President Trump looking down at a sobbing toddler saying, "Welcome to America." They need to change the narrative, it would seem like, from a public relations point of view, but you're saying that's going to be very difficult to do until you can figure out all of the government red tape. How is the division between conservatives and moderate Republicans contributing to this media show?
I think very greatly so. I mean, you've seen almost two different parties in the same party on this issue. But I would point out that many of these members, all of them almost to a T, campaigned on these very issues. They campaigned against President Obama's illegal executive amnesty. They said, if you elect us, we're going to put in strong borders, we're going to end chain migration, we're going to deal with illegal immigrants and not provide amnesty. But you're seeing a division now on these issues, and I do think it's coming out. You saw votes in the House today. We're going to see votes in the House tomorrow. This is playing out very dramatically, and I do think it's going to play into the midterms in November.
That's my next question. Could immigration reform be a liability for Republican candidates heading into the midterms?
A lot of elections focus on the economy and immigration, right? We see that a lot. However, new polling suggests that many Americans, they support legal immigration, but they don't want to have these massive amnesty proposals. They support dealing with illegal immigration through border enforcement or dealing with families at the border in a humane way, but they don't support blanket amnesty. So this could very well be a liability for Republicans if amnesty is the path they choose to take.
Rachel Bovard, thank you so much for joining us. Conservative Partnership Institute, Senior Director of Policy. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Catholic bishops in the U.S. invite the faithful to pray and act in support of religious liberty.
We must be free to live our faith, free from coercion and retribution.
Religious Freedom Week is observed tomorrow until next Friday. The Bishops' Conference released 8 videos offering reflections on the importance of religious liberty. The theme for this year is serving others in God's love. And Archbishop Michael Burbidge, who you see here, visited refugee families in Northern Virginia yesterday. He and about 30 volunteers delivered food boxes and toys provided by Catholic Charities of Arlington and the Migration and Refugee Services program there. Up next, a special gift for the Holy Father from a member of our team. A man from Mississippi pleads guilty to killing 2 Catholic nuns. Rodney Sanders made the pleas to avoid the death penalty. Sisters Margaret Held and Paula Merrill were killed in 2016. Their families did not want the death penalty for Sanders. They called for him to repent and try to reform his life in prison. Pennsylvania's highest court holds up the release of a grand jury report into the handling of sexual abuse claims Those claims are involving 6 Roman Catholic dioceses. The report is expected to reveal details of widespread abuse and efforts to conceal and protect abusive priests. The court did not explain the reasoning behind the halt. President Trump today said people all over Asia are in love with the United States because of the U.S. agreement with North Korea. The president said the U.S. has made tremendous progress with North Korea, and he added the total denuclearization of the Korean peninsula has already begun. Joining me now is Larry Haase, Senior Fellow for U.S. Foreign Policy at the American Foreign Policy Council. Larry, welcome to the program.
Nice to be here.
President Trump tweeted this week, "Funny how fake news, in a coordinated effort with each other, likes to say, I gave so much to North Korea because I met. That's because that's all they have to disparage. We got so much for peace in the world, and more is being added in the finals, even got our hostages remains." How should we view the North Korea summit? A poll came out today saying almost 60% of people think that it was a good thing.
Well, you know, not surprisingly, Americans agree with Churchill, which is jaw is better than war. So I'm not surprised that Americans support the fact that he met with the North Korean leader. But the president's comments really are quite overblown. I don't think the United States got anything out of this. The North Koreans got quite a bit. Legitimacy for their ruthless regime and a U.S. decision to suspend war games with South Korea. Our allies in the Pacific are very worried about where this is going. We've got a lot of troops there. We've got a massive presence there. We secure the peace there, and they're concerned about what the president may give up down the road.
But don't you think that opening dialogue with Kim Jong-un is a step in the right direction?
It depends. It's certainly not a step in the wrong direction, but claiming credit is very premature. We have had these dialogues in the past. We have had
not on this level.
No, but we have had a series of commitments by North Korean leaders that they would fully denuclearize. More than one commitment over the course of the last few decades. And it has never come to pass, which explains why I'm very skeptical that it's going to come to pass here.
The other issue that many Christians and others are talking about is that North Korea is currently holding as many as 120,000 people in gulags.
Right.
They are working them to death, essentially.
That's exactly right.
So as talks continue, should the discussions place more of an emphasis on human rights abuses?
Well, this is really quite ironic because you'll remember that the president was complaining about the Iran nuclear deal, that it only dealt with nuclear weapons and did not deal with all the other activities that the Iranians partake in, including abusing their own people on human rights. And I do find it really quite an absence here, an omission of what we really should be talking about. This is the most ruthless regime on the face of the earth. And the fact that the president met with the young North Korean leader and did not make a big deal about human rights, I think violates the credo and the tradition of the United States, which after all, over the course of time, promotes freedom and democracy around the world. We're proud of that, and this president doesn't take it seriously.
Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. That could be something that the Trump administration is thinking about while doing this. Larry, thank you. Larry Haase, thank you so much for joining us, giving us your viewpoint on the North Korea issue. Senior Fellow for U.S. Foreign Policy at the American Foreign Policy Council.
Thanks for having me.
Finally tonight, as our Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley traveled to Geneva on the papal plane, she shared a special gift with the Holy Father. That's Juliette handing Pope Francis 2 drawings by her 11- and 6-year-old children, Catherine and James. James's message, "Hello, Pope. I love you." And Catherine says, "Please pray for me. I pray for you." For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. We'll leave you with more from the Pope's trip to Switzerland. Catherine and James, pretty cool that you got to give something to the Pope. Good night, and God bless you.